Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Episode 10, Why Dog Training is Important.
But I see this, right? Puppy raising, right? So a lot of our goals with puppies is if we give the puppy a good childhood, we won't have to deal with any of these rescue issues, right? And I guess rescue issues is a pretty vague term. If you guys were going to name your top 4 rescue issues, what would those rescue issues be?
Lack of socialization, separation anxiety, and protectiveness.
Cool. How about you, Corey?
I will say lack of education.
Mm-hmm.
Separation anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see. Lack of what did you say, Mariano? What did you say again?
Socialization, separation anxiety, and territory, protectiveness, resource guarding, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. I won't even want to say like big one could be just structure. Like the dog just doesn't have any structure, right? So which could go in with education as well. But I mean, those are kind of the 3 that I think I see there. And then just to touch on what you were saying, Brent, about being big having a big body with a small brain. It's like, I think
puppy brain, not a small brain,
puppy brain. You're right. So puppy brain. So that goes in with maybe my 3, which are going to be, the lack of education. And so, we have a 4 or 5-year-old dog that has a puppy level education. Yeah. So doesn't mean that he's a puppy, but it means he behaves like a puppy because he's missing those 3 things. Or again, might not be separation anxiety, but. Right. But I mean, maybe we might even see that as being one of the major issues, which I'm saying is a lack of education is what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah. I think lack of education is like such a good umbrella term. Like it covers so many.
It covers
things,
a lot.
Obedience to structure to all those, to all those things. I think if I were going to come up with the top 3 for myself, I would definitely say confidence. I think that's really important. That's one thing that we see lacking because confidence is a byproduct of being educated, of knowing, of having structure, and most importantly, having a family dynamic that you feel safe in. I think that's the most important, right? So it kind of always made me ask the question. It's like, why do we see that dogs who weren't socialized at a young age, why do they tend to fall into these patterns where they get possessive or protective or territorial easier than, let's say, the puppy who is raised from puppyhood under a structured family with a loving family and all those things. And, you kind of, I'm not a kid expert, but like you can definitely see we've all met people, had friends, interacted with people who may have not had the childhoods that we had. Right. And we see that it's harder for them to maybe deal with certain types of stress. It's harder for them to deal with certain types of ideas or trauma. It's hard for them to deal with, I guess, what we would consider their unresolved puppy issues, right? Like self-control, impulse control, anger issues, reactivity, all those things. And so we can kind of see on a human scale how that is related. And so confidence is a big one for me because I think confidence is developed from having a good family, a good structure, and a great education, right? That education to me is what makes us not live in our primitive brain, right? And to make us feel safe that we can be outside, we can transcend that primitive brain a little bit. The other one would be, totally lack of socialization. I think that's really important because it doesn't matter how educated the dog is. If he doesn't understand the real world, then it's not going to work. And then I think the other one, just so I can try and be different, I may really try and think, see if we can help educate some people. It would be the right obedience at the right age. Right. And I think, a lot of times, and don't get me wrong, I'm going to contradict myself a little bit. One big fact point that I want to make is, or one of the big things that bothers me is sometimes based on there is no standard of dog training that exists, right? There's like marketing terms like positive reinforcement or, dominance and stuff like that. There's all these different terms that people use that they don't really know what it means. I always compare dog training to like schooling, where it's like, elementary school is about fundamentals and foundation, right? And learning reading and writing, pretty much. That's what elementary school is for. Middle school is about developing work ethic. High school is about developing social skills and work ethic. College is about independence and being responsible, right? And we see these different tiers of education through humans. And so if we kind of looked at dogs, it's like nothing bothers me more than when someone is using a puppy technique on an adolescent dog or an adult dog. Right.
But that goes back, sorry to interrupt. That goes back to that understanding of, he's still a puppy.
Yeah.
But he's 3 years old.
Exactly. And it's a development thing. Yeah. And there are people who don't understand dog development. So the point I guess I want to make is if people could raise the dog for the age that, and for the age that they are, or what stage of development that they are in. And I'm constantly having to remind people of, now your dog is a teenager. Now your dog is a preteen. We should work like this. Now your dog is a puppy. We shouldn't use these methods because he's a freaking child, right? So I always have to kind of coach people through that process so that they can understand there are different phases in the learning and education process. So that way our dogs can reap the benefits, right? And there are certain circumstances. Again, the reason I said I was going to contradict myself earlier is because when it comes to structure and routine, all of those techniques are pretty much identical to the stuff that I would do with a puppy, right?
Right.
Independence or den training, teaching the dog to live in a den, obedience, chew training, right? All the same things I would do with a puppy, I'll do with a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old rescue dog as well. And they work like a champ. However, when it comes to obedience, when it comes to working on the dog's motivation, that's where we really have to kind of see what's going to work for that particular dog.
Yes. So I look at that as 90% of what a dog is going to need is going to be the same dog to dog. They're all going to need 90% of the same things, right? They are.
And it's because we all live kind of similar lives. That's why.
Exactly. So, and then the 10% is going to be based off of the individual dog, right? So, you have a pug versus, you got the border collie, right? So there's where you're going to say, okay, these techniques aren't going to work and your dog is like this, and we're going to have to do that. But 90% of it is going to be the same. Sure, your dog needs, whatever type of education. It needs to know confinement. It needs to have patience and self-control. It needs to be socialized. All of those things are all going to be applied to every single dog.
Right.
So yes, I think I agree with you on that. And go ahead.
I think that what you said earlier, I do like, that it's like, I liked it when I heard it, but it just had more time to kind of sink into my brain about like reverse engineering stuff. I think that's something that really can make somebody a much better dog trainer. Like if somebody's listening to this, when you start reverse engineering things, because it doesn't just work for goals, it does, but it not only, it also works for, like when we're talking about how to understand where a client might be coming from. And, we talked earlier about like, the better you get with people, the more you kind of open your basis to what kind of different clients you can work with and really empathize with and like connect with. A lot of that I think stems from, I get what you're saying now, which means if I kind of reverse engineer it, it probably started as this at one point. And the same thing kind of goes for dogs. Like I really like working with dogs with a little bit more like behavioral issue. I've always found that fun and interesting. And I've always found working with the type of client that tends to have that type of dog really interesting, and I think that when we're reverse engineering certain things, like is the dog protective, do they stuff themselves in the crate with a bone and you try to call them out and they growl, even though when they're not in the crate, they don't. And like, there's these things that can confuse people. And it's so much fun to like, you sit and you think about what the dog is currently doing. What is this issue? And then you start to, kind of like a person, you empathize with the dog, but just like the person, it's to a degree, because I get where you're coming from, but that doesn't mean that it's appropriate. Right. So you kind of find out where the dog is and what they're thinking in that moment. And then you build that connection of like, oh, the dog does this and the human probably thinks it's this. And then from there, it's like, okay, I'm going to reverse engineer you both and find that like middle ground so that we can start pushing you both in a new direction. I've always found that to be a real cool thing.
Yeah, that's the sport of it, I think. you know,
Right.
in dog training. That's the sport. That's the fun. That's the part where you're like, you never know what you're going to get in front of you. And, you know, there are some clients that are just like, oh my God, it was so great. I gave them the level 1 spiel and they loved it, you know? And there are some people that like really test your skills. There are some people who they really put your skills up to the test and your knowledge up to the test. And, you know, those are the people where I'm happy to, you know, go out of my way to learn something. So I'll go out of my way to test something, you know, to either, you know, prove my point or disprove my point. We're like, oh yeah, that doesn't work. We're going to try it this way. And as long as you have this determination of like no quit in you, you know, you're going to find the answer. You're going to find the solution. And so, yeah, so I really like that.
It's problem solving. That's what we do.
Yeah.
On both ends and in multiple angles, all you're doing is problem solving.
Yeah.
And so obviously it becomes a little bit easier when you've solved a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Over time, you're going to and then that's how you can reverse engineer, because you've said, well, I've seen all of these problems and I've been successful through all of these problems. So where does your dog fit in the problems? Right. And, you know, I have my process of, okay, somebody tells me over the phone, this is my dog, this is where I'm trying to be. So I'm going to say, if I ran that dog through my process, how long is it going to take? And that's the reverse engineering. So when I'm saying reverse engineering, is because I'm running the dog through my process mentally, right? Because of the experience and all of the problem solving. And so, yes, this is a very mentally exhausting profession.
Yeah.
You leave your session that client challenged you with, and you're like, shit.
Yeah, I've been there.
2 hours you've been talking, and that's something that, yes, you have to build up some mental toughness for that, because your job is, think about this, your job is, somebody's paying you to go into their home. They're expecting you to have an answer for everything they ask you, and they want results. Right. And so, yeah, think of that. You have to show up. You have to say, okay, yes, I'm confident. I have experience. I have all of this under my belt, and I have to have an answer for all of this. And you will get there. You will get there if you put the work in and solving all of these problems over here. To have that confidence, as you said, confidence is education, comes from education, right? So the more that you've got, more that you know, and the more that you've done will bring that confidence. And then now you can go into that session, and it's still going to mentally drain you, though. Yeah, it's still going to, because they rapid fire. Right.
Oh, yeah.
They're okay. We're doing this. But what about this? And what about this? And so you're going to have to maintain and control that conversation and the session. And it's going to be very mentally challenging for you. And it's so insane how I could be dead tired going into a session and I leave and I've got so much energy.
Yeah.
That was amazing. We connected. We made progress. They're super happy. The dog is doing better. And you scheduled another session.
And you're just like, who got it?
So it's very,
like you're up for the challenge. You're like,
exactly.
I love this so much. I can't wait to see how I can help this next dog or this next client or this next.
And that was what you said. Right. And that was what you said about, you know, that was the part that you liked was figuring those things out where that person really challenges you and you had to learn new techniques to implement it. Yeah. You like those people that challenge you just as much as you like the ones where you came in and you gave them the level 1 and they were happy.
Yeah.
That's what you were there for. True. One of them just challenged you more than the other. Right. And so at this point, when you become, you know, Brent Labrada and you're great, then not everybody's going to challenge you. True. Right. So when you come across that one that challenges you, you're like, oh, and those people that you sort of connect with there mentally and you can see them, you're like, oh, you get this. Or those people that you talk to where you're like, whoa. And I'm open about this. I tell them when I'm talking to them on the phone, I'm like, the fact that you and I are speaking this way to each other and having this conversation tells me you're ahead of the game.
Yeah, you're ahead
because
of it.
I just talked to 20 people before you where I had to start from the beginning and explain to them, whoa, we're way down here and your dog's here and you're not there yet, right? But those other people that you know maybe are at another level of their understanding of where they're at with their dog, it's just a different connection.
Right.
It's a different connection. That's all.
Right.
Yeah, you know, I think that those are all really good points, and what I really like about what we've been talking about so far, and it's really refreshing to get, you know, Corey's perspective on the whole thing, is there is a certain like kind of finesse to dog training. And the funny thing is, like, the simple kind of rudimentary stuff, you learn easy. Like, you learn how to work food with a dog and, you know, you can learn that in like a 5-hour YouTube stint, you know, but I think where you find experience is just really handy is, other than the client, is just the small kind of minutia, the things that like they're the same, but they're very, hardly different, but they can sometimes make a world of a difference. Like, oh, this dog doesn't like this treat, let's try another one. Or, things that for some reason when you're like newer, they just don't occur to you. But once you hear it, you're like, oh, duh.
Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
We'll see you next time.